So what are your expectations as philanthropists about healthcare in the LGBT community? How do we even develop those expectations and know if we've set them high enough to serve us? And how do we go about creating a framework that is inviting and inclusive to not only members of our community, but to everyone who is interested in improving our health? As you can see, there's no single voice in LGBT health. It's most definitely a group focus, a team sport, and we don't always play so well together as a team. So learning how to truly collaborate will be necessary if we expect better health outcomes. And we've been using this term collaborate for the past day and a half. Does anybody really know how to collaborate? Is there a class that we've been taught how to collaborate? It's messy. It's a little scary, and I dare you to think about that. So no doubt about it, it is certainly an amazing time to be alive. And yes, we may soon have all the civil rights in the world, but if we don't have our health, what good will they do us? In general, the community knows how to talk about civil rights, about marriage equality. My mother knows how to talk about marriage equality, but not so much about health. It's hard to talk about health. It's sort of a drag. And for some reason, and as we saw yesterday, it's very complex and important, the messaging, especially around marriage equality. So now, more than ever, we need to create better messaging to our community about health. For instance, right now in New York City, there is an outbreak of bacterial meningitis among men who have sex with men. The CDC reports only a moderate response with regard to successfully reaching out to LGBT organizations. The numbers aren't large yet, but they are quadruple what they've seen in the past, and they are nervous about when the weather changes and the world becomes more social, that those numbers will increase. So I'm not going to embarrass anyone and ask if you've gotten the vaccine, because I know that you're all very healthy and you want to do everything that you can for your health, but I would like to ask, if we don't know how to talk to our own community about being healthy, where will that leave us? I can remember when I was 15 years old, growing up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the local Yellow Pages had this health resource directory where we could call a number and punch in a code for a particular illness to get information. And, you know, pre-internet, for Scranton, Joe Biden's jerkwater of a town, that was pretty innovative. Now, the list of illnesses and conditions was endless, but one condition really got my attention. Star 16 was the code that gave me my first official briefing on what it meant to be gay. And even though it was a recording, I could still remember the trepidation in the woman's voice reading the whitewashed description of homosexuality. And by the way, she sounded like my mother. And I just kept asking myself, why? Why was homosexuality up there with the list of things like epilepsy and diabetes? I mean, it was so much fun. I had a great coming out experience in Scranton. And after all, the only reason I was actually calling this was because I wanted to find out where we could find more homosexuals in Scranton. Obviously, there are variations on this story for each of us, but what we were all looking for was the same: confirmation, affirmation, and a community. Someone to say, I'm not alone, and I'm okay. And to be honest, that's what our healthcare system needs today. But it was just a recording, and there was no active dialogue. There were no resources. So as a donor, I was drawn to the Trevor Project, and then as a board member. But beyond that, today, 30 years later, it's amazing to realize that there is an actual discipline called LGBT health. There's this new mystery for us to solve, this new discussion for us to start or actually become a part of. And for philanthropy, that's exciting. For so long, our community has needed to look at the subject of health only through the lens of illness, and now we have a chance to look at it through the lens of wellness. I have very high expectations of our healthcare system. We established our foundation, the Sellers Dorsey Foundation, to improve health outcomes for the LGBT community because we realized simply there was a need. After all, our background is in healthcare, Our firm, Sellers Dorsey, was lead consultant to the Romney administration during Massachusetts' historic expansion of insurance, and we assisted SEIU in strategically thinking through the impact of Obamacare. Our work allowed us to see, as many of you, the opportunities that exist for our community, as well as the obstacles. What we learned was that we have basically been invisible to the American healthcare system as a group except for HIV, that there's not a lot of funding directed toward health equality, and most of all, there's a shortage of reliable data. We have so many unanswered questions about the way LGBT people live and make decisions about their health. And we know that we in this room are not what the majority of the folks in our community look like, that there is a disproportionate share of folks who are uninsured and who are undereducated as to what it actually means to come out healthy. So what are we going to do for ourselves? Our foundation decided to take a risk very early in its life. It was less than a year old before we were talking to some really interesting people. We convened a small working group of leading LGBT health experts. And what was different about this was we also invited experts in mainstream media, LGBT media, and social media. Oh, and it didn't hurt that we took them to the Bellagio Center on Lake Como in Italy, which was made possible through a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. Officially, we asked this group to convene for the sake of creating a national campaign on ending LGBT health disparities. That is a tall order. What we discovered was something far more valuable than our original intention. For some, it was the first time that they were in the same room together, and for all of them, it was the same time that there were health experts alongside media experts. Now, everyone in this room understands the value of convening. That's why we're here. So I'd like to reinforce the concept that there is an important place in philanthropy for convening, especially when it comes to LGBT health. There is a lot of room for meetings like this someday where doctors and nurses and providers and advocates all get together and maybe talk about that type of stuff. So here's what happens when you mix things up. They all sound very calm right now, these people on the screens, but to say the least, it was not your traditional meeting. We designed it that way on purpose. One participant even pulled me aside and quietly named our process spontaneous human combustion. There was hand-wringing, disagreement, expectations about what should be happening, and a constant request for an agenda. We literally rocked their world by withholding an agenda for 4 days. A lot of things came from those 4 days in Italy, but some of the most surprising discoveries were very simple, and I'd like you to consider them. Include the next generation in conversations, not only for its point of view, but also for everything you don't know about how these young people live. Include the people who could never afford to be with us here today to understand the daily struggle of just living. And include those who for the first time in their lives will have health insurance and will need to know how best to take advantage of the giant step toward living healthy. I'm thankful to everyone in this room for working so hard to change my life for the better through civil rights. And I'd like to remind all of you that health is our new opportunity. And it's our new opportunity to serve the world that we're living in and not the world that we grew up in. Civil rights are essential, and health is an essential human service. And then this is just a little personal note. If you're wanting to be of advantage to everyone you know, you first have got to find a way to be of advantage to yourself. Carve out more time to be better to yourself and take care of your health. Thank you.